We're going to be joined by Emmanuel Latraverse, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for Radio-Canada. She's with me in Ottawa. Marie Vastel of Le Devoir is also here, and in Montreal tonight, economist Michel Kelly-Gagnon and Marty Patriquin of Maclean's. Let's just go around the table. Emmanuel, what are you watching for tonight?
Well, essentially, what everyone, I think, is watching for is what's going to happen to the CAQ vote. Will it materialize? Will it materialize by, and where will that lead to, essentially? So will they save the seats they have? And I think there's about 30 ridings that are very close, a lot of three-way races, and that's the part that no one really knows what's going to happen, because he seems to have had a surge, doing much better, but as Marie Vastel was pointing out earlier on your show, he's still below the margin where he was at the last election. So we're far. So will he play spoiler, I think, will be kind of a defining feature of the evening.
Yeah, I mean, does it rise or does it crash, basically? And and who does it take away from? And if he does rise, also what would be interesting is where is it? Is it in the 450 around Montreal? Is it in Quebec, and therefore he just keeps his seats with a larger margin, or is it spread out throughout the province, in which case it might not change a whole lot except just to make the night a little longer?
And Martin, I want to ask you whether you think what you're watching, and you may have just heard Michael Fortier say that the issue of referendum and sovereignty could have been dealt with better, differently. What's your take on how this unfolded?
The amazing thing to me has always been that the Parti Québécois knows that this question is going to come up. They have that knife-edge issue of having to please their base and the public at large. And the fact that they didn't have talking points from the beginning of the campaign on this issue when reporters asked them about it, to nip it in the bud, speaks volumes about the organization of Maruel's campaign. Mr. Pellado came out and pumped his fist, sure, but she also went on a sort of, and as I said before, a flight of fancy, talking about, sharing the Canadian dollar and being able to go to the Rockies freely and open borders and all that kind of stuff. All she had to do was stand up there and say, look, yes, I want a country. This is not an election on a referendum. This is an election on moving Quebec forward. Done, finished. Instead, she went on this this almost tirade for 2 days. That's personally what sunk the party.
Mm-hmm. And Michel, just jump in here on what it was about that spooked Quebecers. Is it kind of the reality of it, of what happens on the other side of that referendum, or is it simply that it wasn't a place people want to go right now?
Well, indeed, all of the above, but I think the fact is that even on the track record of the economy, the numbers were not that great. Now, to be fair, sometimes you can't pinpoint all the bad economic indicators to one government, but the fact is that their track record on that was not amazing either.
You talk about the economy, and let's have a bit of a roundtable on this, because the struggle in any election is to control the ballot box question. What will people enter that box and tick the box on? Pauline Marois thought it was the Charter of Values. Maybe it was going to be the referendum. As you said, that proved to be a deal breaker. Emmanuel, what have we learned about Quebec in this election? Because it seems that nobody in the end could control what the ballot box question is going to be.
And I think that's part of the story tonight, is that no one was able to define the ballot box question. To me, the ballot box question tonight is one of trust, and not in the nice, happy, trusty thing of usual. But it's an issue. Do people trust Mme. Marois not to have a referendum? Or do they trust Philippe Couillard to have cleaned house? Because that's been another big feature of this election campaign, and it's been something that he's been dragging through the campaign, is the issue of ethics. It's only 18 months after the Charest government was ousted. And it's quite fascinating that with all this kind of over his party, the Charbonneau Commission, everybody's waiting to see what's going to happen. He did not have a line in his election platform about this, as if they could. It's a bit like the PQ in the referendum, don't talk about it, it's going to go away. Well, they kind of had the same strategy on their weak point, which was the ethics, and I think that for a lot of voters, this is what is going to weigh on their mind today in the last few minutes as they wait to cast their vote, And
I would agree with what Rosie was saying earlier, that I don't think this is a vote for integrity or for referendum or the charter. I think it's a vote against. From everyone that I've talked to in Montreal or around here in Gatineau, people don't vote for something they want. They're trying to block what they do not want. And I think that also will be interesting. As Rosie said, if someone gets a mandate, it's not a mandate, yay you, it's a mandate, save us. And so that'll be interesting. And definitely the problem was no one was able to kind of make the conversation their own. And we were talking about François Legault earlier from the CAQ. I think he tried to come forward with certain proposals. He's the new party. We didn't really hear what he was doing.
And he ran a very negative campaign, which is probably the strategic error that they made. He very easily could have played spoiler in this game. He had a quite complete election platform with sort of new ideas that was kind of different as the usual.
But we never talked about those ideas.
But he was
on
so
that
negative.
note, I want to bring in, bring you in back in, Michel, and ask. You know, one of the things that did happen in this campaign was that the ethics question got it sort of tarred everyone in the end. So that was really the Liberals' weakest point going into this. That's the reason why they lost power. And yet, in the end, you know, will voters go into the booth and remember there was something about Marois' husband, and you know, it became this kind of something. Everybody wore it a little bit. Was that in the end a bad strategy?
Well, you know, I mean, it was discussed and debated a lot, but if I refer myself to the polls that were conducted, Quebecers were putting job and job creation at #1 or #2, and they were putting public finances and the public debt of Quebec as, again, #2 or 3 or 1. I mean, those two that I mentioned, public finance and job, were among the top 2 out of 3. So I think that even though ethics and other issues were debated a lot, you know, I think in the end those are the issues that are of real concern to the majority, even for PQ voters, I would say. And from that sense, I think maybe that's part of the surge that I would explain of the CAQ, because, you know, they were talking a lot about those issues.
Martin, do you want to jump in on that? I mean, would you? I guess that's the question: is when people walk into the voting booth, what is at the top of their mind? If we've taken the referendum question off the table, is it the ethics question?
It's hard to say. Yeah, you know, just to pick up on what Emmanuel was saying, ethics is very important. There's a l'actualité poll last year, and while it wasn't, Michel's right, it wasn't 1, 2, or 3. It was about #5. You know, ethics is still very important. I think the Liberals really dodged a bullet here in the fact that it wasn't mentioned very much. Yeah. And I would like to just point out just to how resilient the Liberal brand is in Quebec of the provincial party. We're going back to the last election. It was supposed to be apocalypse for Jean Charest. He got 50 seats, which was only 4 less than the PQ. He got less than a percentage point less in the popular vote. Couillard, it's supposed to be dead in the water, not a good campaigner. Here he is ahead in the polls. Yep. What does that tell you about the brand of a party? And it's absolutely astonishing that after 18 months they might come back into power.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're back more with our special Quebec Votes election coverage. What are the possible outcomes tonight as we wait for the results to roll in? Mary Vastel, Martin Patriquin, Emmanuel Latraverse, and Michel Kelly-Gagnon will be back, as will Evan and I.
Welcome to a special coverage of the Quebec election countdown to Quebec Votes. I'm Evan Solomon.
And I'm Amanda Lang. And no matter the outcome tonight, Quebecers' futures are very much up in the air. They're big challenges for whomever ends up running the show at Quebec's National Assembly. What are they? How quickly will the political talk turn from separatism and the secular charter if the PQ is out? We've got our Quebec panel with us, Emmanuel Latraverse, Marie Vastel, Michel Kelly-Gagnon, and Martin Patriquin. And Emmanuel, I want to start with you and ask, what is kind of the job #1 in terms of what's at stake here for whomever's on the other side in power after tonight, at the end of this night? What do you think is sort of the most important issue on the table?
Well, if there is a change of government, the most important issue will be passing a new budget for the Quebec government, even if Mme. Marois would be re-elected, because Quebec still doesn't have a budget. I'll remind everyone, she tabled her budget and then called an election without that budget ever having been voted. And so I think that Quebecers will quickly get a signal as to where their new government is going, and it gives an opportunity for whatever government comes into place to actually start moving things forward. It gives Monsieur Couillard a chance to put quickly his stamp as to the changes he wants to bring in terms of expenses, in terms of cuts and rationalizing of Quebec's expenses and its different ministries, and so I think that's how we're going to be fixed quite clearly, if you will, as to where Quebec is going.
Marty, let me pick up with you on what's at stake and start with the PQ, because for Pauline Marois, this could be her political future and the future of her party. If they don't win a minority or a majority, their political future, there's a lot at stake for them. They could be in the political wilderness. What's at stake for the party leaders tonight?
Yeah, I would even go as far as to say is if Marwa doesn't get a majority, she's going to be out on her heels. Unfortunately for her, this was an all-in election for the PQ. They threw everything at it. They went full bore on the charter specifically. They alienated a lot of people, and thinking that they could get to that majority status and sort of coast along. If she doesn't get that majority and comes back and after 18 months is in the exact same position as she was 18 months before, people in the PQ are going to look like, look, you can't do it. You had your kick at the can, and they're going to do what they do very well to PQ leaders. Internally, they put a whole bunch of knives into their backs. And you have lots of people, some big egos. You got Bernard Drinville, Jean-François Lisée, and dare I say it, Pierre Carpelleto waiting in the wings should he win a seat. So if it's not a majority government, it's doomsday for Mrs. Marwa.
I agree with Martin, but just to pick up on that, I do think Pierre Carpelleto will want that seat. At the same time, if he's seen as the guy who made this whole thing derail and go south, I don't know that the base will want Pierre Carpelleto. And I'm also wondering where the CAQ will play in terms of their stake. I mean, could they become the new nationalist little right-wing party? I mean, this kind of bleeding out that we saw of the PQ on the left and the hard separatists to Québec solidaire and the soft nationalists to CAQ, is that going to keep going? And could the CAQ benefit from it, or is it again going to crash? I don't know.
And what will Mr. Legault do?
If we're going to speculate, Michel, I'm going to bring you back in and say, let's just say here that we do get a Liberal government. If it's a minority government and it is the CAQ that is a kind of a coalition, whether formal or informal, what does that mean for the future of Quebec? I mean, what should the rest of Canada look at that and interpret it to mean?
Well, Quebec is going to have to rework on what I would call its brand. To attract people and to attract quality people, you have to be perceived as being an open and tolerant society. Now, I'm not saying that Quebec is not an open and tolerant society. I'm saying its brand as being that did take a beating in the media all throughout the world and in English Canada. So I think there will be some repair work to do. And let's not forget that about a quarter of the skilled immigrants who were admitted in 2011 in Quebec left, and that more than 3/4 of the immigrants that were got in the province as business in 2011, again, more than 3/4 have already left. Now, I'm not saying that this is because of the charter. There was a tendency of losing those people a long time ago. But I'm just saying that this charter debate and everything that was around it certainly did not help to reverse that trend. And for a society that does not have many children to start with, this is a very worrisome trend.
Emmanuel, you wanted to pick up, but there's obviously a lot of consequence here. There's the economic issues that are top of mind, but on a night like this, there's also those political consequences, and everybody, I guess polls close in 13 minutes. Political futures will be determined.
I think
very
a lot
quickly.
of them, yeah.
But we've talked a lot about the future of Madame Marois, whatever happens tonight. But I think we have to keep an eye on the ball and what happens to Mr. Legault. At the beginning of the campaign, he said and repeated that his line in the sand, he said, I'm in it, it's my last call, if it's last kick at the can, if it ain't working, I'm leaving, forget it. And the line was doing better than 2012. That's a pretty high mark, when you look at. So what is he going to do? And I think that depending on the results tonight, he might have a shifting line, if you will.
Yeah.
Because if there is a Liberal minority, the Charbonneau Commission is headed into the financing of political parties. Now, everybody expects the Liberal Party to be quite tarnished by this. No one knows what's going to come out of the PQ. It might be a very long 12 months for both main parties in Quebec. Very difficult. And so it will be interesting if he's got an okay score tonight to see if he's actually not maybe tempted to stick around to see if he could actually
and
kind of cash in electorally.
And finally win on being the new guy who's not tainted by any scandals because he's a new party. And
the third way.
Yeah, and if he does go, what happens to the CAQ? Because it's Legault's proposal, it's Legault's project. Yeah.
You guys
so
talk
what do we
about that,
do?
but Amanda, you and I keep speaking about this for all the whoever comes in. they've got to deal with a Quebec economy that has got
do.
fundamental problems. There's a big hill to climb.
It's a huge hill, and I'll tell you what, one question that I have, and I'd be interested in the thoughts of any of the panelists, but I want to start with you, Martin, which is the issues in this election have been particularly divisive, and whether that's separation or that's secular movement, where does it leave the people of Quebec? You know, elections can be a time to bring people together in a way, and it can divide. Where is Quebec after this election campaign?
As we said before, the brand Quebec is hurt. The personal experience I can talk about is certainly with Montreal's cultural communities. I spent a lot of time reporting on it and talking to people, certainly in the Muslim community in Montreal. There's a sense that the damage is already done, even if there's a Liberal majority tomorrow or tonight, and you know, the charter's put on the shelf somewhere. The damage is done. There was an understanding from a lot of the cultural communities that they were not necessarily as important as the rest of the Quebecers, that they're constantly seen as new arrivals, that they're somehow different because of what they happen to be wearing on their heads and whatnot, and that is elemental, and that sticks to people, and that's. It was really hard to watch my province go through that.
Yeah, and even for the historical minority of Anglophones of Quebec, most of them are still there by choice, and you know, some of them are very, very tired of this debate still going on. So that has also created a damage, not in certain cases of people actually physically leaving, but certainly in some instances that I was told about of people transferring some of their assets outside of the province of Quebec. You know, especially in the Jewish Anglophone community, I will tell you that there is a movement in that regard.
All right.
On the economy, to pick up on what Amanda was referring to, I think it's one of the great ironies of this campaign is that jobs, public finances are top of mind in people's mind.
Yes.
It was so little addressed.
Yeah.
Everybody thought it was going to be an issue, a campaign about this. And I think that's a reflection on the programs of the two main parties. The PQ, the Liberal Party, you didn't have a sense of really shaking things up profoundly to make changes. So it made them hard to compare in a way. And I think that's why that issue that is so important didn't have the place it deserved.
We all thought the elephant in the room was going to be the sovereignty issue. It turned out that everyone recognized it was the economy. No one talked